Chapter 3. Life in England. We arrived in London in 1988. I remember coming out of the airport and we were greeted by a gentleman that had a sign with our last name Oji. He took us to his car, and as I gazed out of the window, it was evening time, and I saw the traffic lights, and I exclaimed, "Daddy, London reminds me of America." The gentleman driving the car looked at me. Daddy also looked at me with a look of shock on his face that read, "She still remembers what it was like to be in America." The gentleman took us to the hotel, and we stayed there for a couple of months. It was really a nice hotel, and we had maids come in every so often during the week. They used to vacuum the carpet and did light housekeeping. On one occasion, I picked up all the dirt off the carpet, and the maid who came in to do vacuuming asked if somebody had been by to vacuum the carpet, and I told her no, but didn't tell her that I picked up all the dirt off the carpet because it was just my secret. My caretaker had told me not to pick up the debris from the carpet because the maid would arrive to vacuum the carpet. I don't know why I did it. I just thought it was something I could do because as children, we were normally indoors all day and didn't go anywhere for a long time. And when we did, we went to a beautiful park. The park reminded me a lot of a park that's in Washington, D.C., that has beautiful springs and acres of land, Meridian Park. This park in Washington, D.C., the United States, is located on 16th Street. The park in England had lots of acres of land. I remember it being sunny and bright. So I think we must have gone to that park when it was summertime. I remember on one occasion I needed to go to the restroom. I proceeded to the men's restroom and I was stopped by an Indian man who didn't know English. He pointed to the sign which indicated that restroom was just for males and not for women. I was grateful he was there, or else I would have had an embarrassing experience at that restroom. Without further delay, I quickly ran to the ladies' room and went back to my family. We had a family friend also who was in England. They too were also part of the Nigerian embassy. They had lots of children, and many times we would go to visit them. On one occasion, the mom of the household asked if I and my siblings were hungry, and I said yes, and she made us food. And she asked a second time if we wanted more food, and I said yes, and she made us something to eat, and then asked a third time if we wanted food, and I said yes, and she made us more food to eat, and then exclaimed, "You children eat so much food." So I learned then not to ask for more food. It would be a long time before we visited them. Some years later, they all moved to a big house where we visited them often. Their mom was no longer with them, but may have been in the United States or Nigeria. The oldest daughter was in charge of making their food. Her brother had a habit of entering the restroom when his younger sister took baths. One day, I went to sleep over. She informed me not to let anyone into the bathroom as she took a bath. But her brother approached me at the door. I fled immediately, intimidated by his stature and presence. I was 10 at the time, and he must have been 14 or older. I don't know what he did to her, but her pleas for help were usually ignored. After the hotel, I and my family found a beautiful home in northern England. The school I went to was called St. Agnes. I didn't have many friends at school. There were cliques or a small group of friends with loyalty to one another, so I would oftentimes befriend my sister's friends, which she wasn't too happy about. School in England was a lot different than Nigeria. The education in Nigeria was family oriented. In Nigeria, you learn life skills in school in order to survive. In London, schooling was restricted to learning about English, math, spelling, physical education, netball, cricket, football or soccer, running, swimming, team sporting competitions, learning how to dance with a boy, playing a musical instrument, and learning about British history. As a youth, I found England to be boring. My experience of England was limited to school, watching the television, and family outings to the park. In Nigeria, my favorite program offered Igbo language lessons on the television. In London, by the age of 9, one particular programming on the television caught my interest. The subject of interest was the pillar of salt. This pillar of salt was Lot's wife. In Nigeria, I remember a Bible story about Lot and how his wife looked behind her, and as a result of punishment, was turned into a pillar of salt. At 9 years old, my young mind wondered if the Bible was real, and if so, if the same voice that spoke to me when I had been chastised for stealing a pencil sharpener in Nigeria would speak to me again in London to tell me if the Bible was real. But nobody spoke to me. I was waiting for an answer, but nobody answered me. Mr. Brewster was the headmaster at St. Agnes. He was very passionate about the children singing church songs, performing Christian plays, dramas, and hosted African events. I remember sitting in the gym that served as our cafeteria and singing with the other children from all classes. Caesar Augustus has said it. We all must, we all must go home to be counted. The theme was centered on Joseph and Mary, who had to return to Jerusalem to be counted in the census according to Roman rule. Although they were living in a different city, they both had to go to their paternal city to be counted among the census of Jerusalem. Once a year, Africans at my school, St. Agnes, were allowed to wear African clothing. Mr. Brewster would call the local newspapers to take pictures of the African children. It was a very exciting experience. I never had African clothing at a young age, but my friend would always let me borrow her African clothing, and we were able to make newspaper headlines twice. And I was able to make newspaper headlines twice for 2 years. My dad, excited as he was, sent the newspapers to Nigeria, to his room of treasured possessions.